Alright, so some of you might be wondering by the title of this video, Shadow, why are you making a video about Dr. Ratio's rerun when like 98% of the player base already has him? Well, I just like to yap, I'll be honest. But today we are going to go over Dr. Ratio's rerun. So I'm going to give a quick recap on what he does, talk about how good he is in the current state of the game, and then I'm going to talk about whether or not he is going to be worth pulling for. And I am going to have a bit more of an emphasis on what you should do if you already have Dr. Ratio, because so many of us already have him since he was given out for free. So starting out with his kit recap here, Dr. Ratio is an imaginary hunt character, and thankfully he does have a pretty simple kit. He's a follow-up character that also does get a lot of benefits if the enemies he's fighting are debuffed. So there's two main parts of his kit that we're going to focus on, which really have the core parts of his gameplay. The first one is going to be his talent, which gives him a 40% fixed chance to do a follow-up attack after using his skill. And for every debuff that the enemy has on them, it's going to increase this fixed chance by 20%, meaning that if you have 3 debuffs on an enemy, then you're going to have a guaranteed follow-up attack every time he uses his skill, which is really nice to get a lot of damage because his follow-up does actually have the highest damage multiplier in his kit. He also does have 2 traces that give him even more buffs to this follow-up attack, and overall just damage increases for targeting enemies with debuffs. So his Ascension 2 trace is going to give him a 2.5% crit rate boost and a 5% crit damage boost per debuff on the targeted enemy up to a max of 6, meaning that you can have a max of 15% extra crit rate and 30% extra crit damage from this, which is really nice. Then his Ascension 6 trace gives him a 10% damage dealt bonus for each debuff that the enemy has beyond 3 debuffs. So once you start getting to 4 debuffs, you'll have 10% and so on and so forth. And this caps out at 50% extra damage as well if you have a ton of debuffs, which you probably won't see the full potential of this as much, but it is good to get those little bit of bonuses as well, regardless of what kind of comp you're using with him. Then the other important part of his kit is going to be his ultimate. Now his ultimate is a single target attack, but the really important part is that it's going to apply the Wiseman Folly state to the target that's hit by it. And when an enemy has Wiseman's Folly, the next 2 times they are hit by any ally's attacks besides Dr. Ratio's skill, because that'll trigger on its own, it's going to trigger Dr. Ratio's follow-up attack. So you do get some extra procs of this follow-up attack every time you use his ultimate, which is really nice to get a big burst of damage, especially if you're able to line it up with your buffs or with other like debuffs, depending on what kind of comp you're running. So that is the main parts of his kit there. So now let's talk about how good he is in the game now. So I think all in all, I would say he's like an okay DPS. Like there's definitely worse than him, but there's definitely better too. Mine isn't really built up to speed, so you're not going to see the craziest like B-roll in the video. I'm not even sure what I'll use for that, but I'm sure you guys will be seeing clips of him on the screen here. But I do think that single target is in a bit of a bad spot in Star Rail right now, because a lot of content is AoE or blast focused. So a character like Dr. Ratio is going to struggle. I think really the only like single target character that you see a lot as like a main DPS is going to be Fei Xiao. So you are just, for a character at Dr. Ratio's level, you're probably not going to see a lot of use out of him and get a lot of value out of him right now. That can change given if they change back to a more like single target focused like endgame style, but ever since 3.0 we've been in an AoE style, or like AoE is favored, so it's going to be a little tough for people who want to use Dr. Ratio. But of course, if you have a ton of investment on him, which we're going to go into in a moment here, I do think that you could get some more value out of him for sure. Now let's talk about whether or not it is worth pulling Dr. Ratio. Starting with a first-time player, if you're one of the like 2% of people playing Honkai Star Rail that don't have Dr. Ratio on your account, if you're just pulling him, you're easy or S0, I don't think he's worth it in all honesty. There's so many better characters that are around him, both, I'm sure both upcoming characters for 3.3 are going to be very good. Caster is being out now, and then also Anaxa releasing alongside Ratio. They're all just better than he is in terms of what they're offering for the game and just like the state of the game right now. Obviously, if you like Dr. Ratio and you don't have him, like go for him. I'm not going to tell someone not to pull for a character they like. But if you're looking at it from an overall like account value perspective, which is what I try to, talk to when I'm making these kinds of videos, I don't think he's very worth pulling right now. But for the 98% of us who already have Dr. Ratio, and if you like using him, you might be thinking, maybe it's time to do some vertical investment, right? Let me get a light cone, let me get some Eidolons. And some people probably already did some vertical investment when he came out because you didn't have to pull for the original copy. So I think that, in my opinion, I think that the signature light cone is a bit more valuable, but I do also know that a good amount of players already do have that, so I am going to talk about everything here. So starting with the light cone, this is going to give him 20% crit damage at S1, and also an extra 8% crit damage per debuff on the target, which can stack up to 3 times, meaning that you're going to be able to get a pretty solid amount of extra crit damage. And anytime with the S1 that you use his ultimate, you're going to gain Disputation. This is going to last for 2 turns and is going to make the target take 36% increased damage, as well as ignore 24% of the target's defense, which is really good for Dr. Ratio here, because you're just getting a lot more damage on his kit, not just from the extra crit damage buffs, but also from when you use his ultimate to make those Wiseman's Folly follow-up attacks do even more damage. So then for his E1, which I still think is, fairly valuable, the buffs on his Ascension Trace 2 will be increased to 10 debuffs maximum instead of 6, which means that the maximum buff for the crit rate is now 25%, and the maximum crit damage buff is now 50%, which is a pretty nice boost. And you also get 4 stacks of this unconditionally, meaning that you don't need to apply any extra debuffs to get these new maximums, which is really nice. You still need to just apply 6. So that is good for his kit as well. So you are just getting some extra crit rate and crit damage for free on top of what you would have already had with this trace. Then for his other Eidolons, I won't go over each of them individually because I feel like once you go beyond E1 or E2 for characters, you don't really there's not really a need to be let's analyze every single one individually. They're all going to give you some pretty solid damage increases. Of course, with E3 and E5, you're going to get some scaling increases. And I know E4 does give him some extra energy, so you can get Wiseman's Folly a bit more consistently. So overall, you do get some good, investment value there. But just for the state of the game for Honkai Star Rail, if you're looking to make the best decisions for your account, I don't think Dr. Ratio is the wave right now. I don't think anyone is I'm pulling for Ratio because he's such a good character right now, for gameplay wise. People are really just pulling for him if they like him and they missed out on the free Ratio. So that's really all I have to say for Dr. Ratio here. Let me know down in the comments below what you all think. But thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But with that, everyone, I will see you all next time.